Newcastle. You all know Newcastle. It's that city just 2.5 hours from Sydney by car or by train. Even faster by plane. The city where they make steel and where coal comes from. Yes, that's Newcastle, an industrial city. And in many cases, that's all people know. You know better, we're sure. Newcastle has everything. Just what these visitors are about to find out. Newcastle is big, with an even bigger future.
I had no idea Newcastle had so many wonderful beaches.
Been looking at the beaches, have you? We have got a whole lot of beaches and a whole lot more for relaxing too.
You know, if you really look at it, in the Newcastle region, there's over 20 miles of beaches, about the same as the stretch between Coolangatta and Surfers. And that doesn't include Port Stephens.
Where's that?
It's about 30 miles north. It's a holiday area and it's got everything you can imagine. A lot of us feel this holds a great future for the area.
Just for holidays?
No, a lot more, including shipping. The land values are soaring right along the stretch north from here.
A fair way to travel to work, though, surely.
Well, with a bridge the second longest in New South Wales and road development like this from the city, no, it'll be another Lake Macquarie.
Yeah, we've heard of Lake Macquarie. They say it's beautiful.
Well, if you like water fun just minutes from most suburbs, it is beautiful. Actually, it's one of the largest shires in the state. Lake Macquarie is very, very popular for housing. Really no more than 20 minutes or so to work in the city or industries. And land values in some areas increase anything up to 15% yearly. Anyway, there's plenty of time to take touring these spots. How about a look at the city itself? Firstly, the Golden Mall.
The what?
Golden Mall, its business centre in the city. Now, this was the first area in the state designed to take out traffic from the street and turn it into a shopping mall. Just about everything in this section: fashion, jewellery, books, restaurants, you name it.
Now, how about parking?
Well, there's David Jones' large car park. And at the moment, they're building a new one close by to handle the hundreds of cars visiting this area. But don't think the city has just one big shopping complex. For some 3 miles along Hunt Street, there's even more. The largest privately owned travel agency in Australia is in this stretch. In fact, the largest cooperative store in the Southern Hemisphere is in this 3-mile stretch. Impressed?
Let me look around here for a while.
Talking about clothes, did you know that Newcastle can boast a large manufacturer?
Rundles. They employ over 300 people. They make clothing for all over Australia. All types, suits, trousers. You know, Newcastle makes a lot more than just steel. Chances are the lamps you use in your home came from here. You've heard of Bradmill gear? Well, outside Newcastle at Rutherford, there's this complex. There's oat butter, milk, cheese, yogurt, all here. For something a little bit harder, Newcastle has its own brewery, and that's soon to be as famous as our wines. Everything from Venetian blinds to steel. That's Newcastle.
Well, that was a great sell. But now, how about shopping? Where else is there other than in the city?
With 93 suburbs in an area that would cover a great deal of Melbourne and suburbs, Newcastle has to spread its retail outlets far and wide. Kotara Fair is a big Woolworths complex in the suburbs. And there are some beaut shops here, from everyday needs to those special items. Jesmond, another Newcastle suburb, has another of these shopping complexes. The same goes for Charlestown, only this is run by the cooperative store. Remember we mentioned them earlier? The newest is the Kmart. Now here you can buy food, clothing, even refrigerators on a supermarket basis. Come on, John, you haven't said a thing.
I'm just taking it all in. These youngsters have reminded me. Tell me, do they have to go to Sydney for university experience?
No. This is the University of Newcastle, with a varied curriculum and a very, very impressive design. How about this layout? Gets right away from dull old buildings and asphalt, gives me the idea of a little city all of its own. About 3,500 students attend this uni, and there are quite a few from neighbouring Asian countries too. They can take the majority of courses offered by the usual Australian university. Well, commerce in Newcastle is growing all the time, and graduates are very valuable. Same as tertiary industry needs engineers. Take the Liddell Power Station, for example, and it's the biggest of its type in Australia. Or any of the big industrial companies throughout the Newcastle area. Come on, I don't want to get too technical. How about dinner and a night out on the town?
Oh, a takeaway snack would do me.
Well, there's plenty of those.
Personally, a good restaurant and a night out.
Take your pick. Maybe then a visit to one of our clubs. Funny how some people think Newcastle's a little dull.
Dull?
Well, tomorrow you'll see even more Newcastle.
Oh, first let's absorb what we saw today. Newcastle's quite a place.
A place to face the future.
Could you pop over here? Could we have your views on the proposed new state for New England?
I think it's a very, very excellent idea. I think new states are necessary, but I think in the referendum we won't get it because people aren't educated to believe in smaller and better states.
How do you feel about it? What are your feelings towards a new state, a New England state?
I think, what is it?
Well, what do you think? I'm asking you.
I think it's not much good.
Why is that?
Well, I can't see any point in it.
Why?
Well, show me the point and I'll tell you.
We're asking you, would you like living in a new state?
I'd like to get something new and change. Could be a good thing.
It could be. Why? What benefits do you think we would derive from such?
Well, I don't know about the benefit for the, I'd say the state government got too much say now, so it's time we had a say. I don't know too much about it.
Could we have your views on the proposed new state for New England? What are your views on it?
Never been there.
We want a new state in this area because the amount of the taxes we pay are not spent in this area.
Sydney gets a lot of our money, Sydney, and I think we could use that money to better advantages here in Newcastle in the north.
I'm of the opinion that all governments legislate and allocate their finance in the interests of all of the states, not just one particular section. Do the new staters want preferential treatment over Sydney, Port Kembla or Newcastle?
I think if we have the new state, we will have a few more politicians, but it won't be any more expensive than it is now. And
so I think it's only going to create a lot of more big-bellied politicians. We've got too many now.
The time now seems opportune to do something about connecting Murwillumbah with Brisbane by a standard gauge railway link. It's quite apparent that with the growth in population that's taking place on the Gold Coast, the time is rapidly coming when attention will have to be given to this subject, and many of the councils in this area and the southern part of Queensland consider that this is a matter of vital concern to them, not only from the passenger point of view, but more particularly from the freight point of view.
No, I feel that local government certainly requires the assistance of the state government and the federal government financially to bring about proper decentralisation.
And do you think that a new state will bring new industries to this area?
I'm very convinced that any move towards decentralisation would benefit the northern areas of New South Wales.
Northern New South Wales is suffering a brain drain.
48,000 people left the new state in a 10-year period. With self-government, we're going to have northern men making decisions locally on the spot. Our members of Parliament will be 100% of their time concerned with what's going on here. Decentralisation will bring more jobs.
I think commercial firms with their state offices in Sydney will probably set up state offices in the new state. Distributors may easily start up distribution centres. And industrialists may well find that they can be better served in this area of the present New South Wales by setting up factories in the area. All this will mean increased employment and increased prosperity. But probably the most important thing of all is that under a new state, the government would be able to offer inducements to industrialists to create factories in the area without having to worry about the competing claims of the Sydney suburbs and the Sydney industrial complex. We could get our own factories going.
The new staters are trying to create a false impression that a new state will bring about decentralisation of industry. This, in my opinion, is a completely false argument. The state and the federal governments have been trying for years to bring about decentralisation, spending millions of pounds on these ideas. Decentralisation is costly. It will mean increased taxation in a new state if it's going to be financed. And after all, the decision to decentralise industry is not made by the government, it's made in the boardroom by the directors of the companies if they want to take their industry out of the city.
We can't sell our milk to the milk board as it is now. What good will a new state be to us?
We either go forward to secure an abundant living as provided under the United Charter of Human Rights, or fall down and are downtrodden. That will be our dismal lot under the totalitarian law of the New South Wales government. I would resemble the attitude of the government as to what is applicable to the deep South in America, a repressed people. We are here today to discuss our survival or subjection, to work and be rewarded justly and equitably for the fruits of our labour, or to suffer a rank injustice. Servile to an iniquitous and infamous law whose sole aim appears to be to exploit one area of the state and to give the reward of their labour to the powerful and vested interests of the city. Make no mistake, not only the dairy farms of the North Coast are suffering, the whole North Coast, all the people of the North Coast, every one of you who live and work here.
Dairy farmers within the proposed new state area would be in definite opposition to the proposition of a new state. The reasons are quite simple, I think, and because the economy of the farmers themselves would be so greatly affected. At present, in the northern milk zone, the farmers enjoy an estimated annual income of at least $20 million. Inevitably, this income must be lost if the new state comes into being. This also must have a serious impact on the economy of the rural towns, which depend on the prosperity of the farmers in their area for their own prosperity. Inevitably also, land values of the farms affected in this area must be greatly reduced.
Last year, our management certificate students carried out a survey in the new state area, and there was a generally expressed fear that the new state system would provide us with a new education system, or another education system, and this in itself could create a large number of problems insofar as we have 4 educational systems on the eastern coast of Australia. And transfer of personnel, teachers, staff in business houses and so on within this area could mean a lot of disruption to the education of their children. We've seen the disruption that came with the introduction of the Wyndham scheme, which is now just settling down, but a new education system, even though it took some time to come into being, I think would cause quite a lot of trouble and perhaps a lot of failures amongst the students who would have to transfer with their parents throughout the new state area.
I don't think the education will be changed in any way, only the changes in the curriculum which would come normally.
Don't you think there'll be any change at all, in other words?
No, only the ones that would come in New South Wales government state schools.
What has been done about it, whether he had taken it up with Mr. Anthony, Mr. Wiley, Mr. Stevens, you name them, we've got them. Right from Taree to Tweed Heads, we've got them. And I still can't get an answer for it. So to me, this is not just a matter of Mr. Askin, Mr. Cutler, this is a matter for the whole of the government and the representation we got here.
In the educational field, there should be very little room for complaint in this area. We have 2 universities, and as universities simply cater for the end product of primary, secondary and possibly tech education, I would say that the service is at all levels would be very, very great to provide for those 2 universities, when we remember particularly that the rest of the state has none. Sydney, with 10 times the population, has only had 2, has just achieved its 3rd, and I would think, in view of those facts, that the educational facilities at all levels are much better in this referendum area than elsewhere in the state, or for that matter, I think, I can say with truth, in the whole of the Commonwealth.
Margaret Lesmore.
I'm quite satisfied with the way it is.
I'd like it in this north.
It's a good question.
Probably Newcastle, I suppose.
Well, I think that should be at Armidale.
Where would you like the capital to be?
I would prefer Newcastle.
Oh, well, it puts Newcastle on the map.
To see big state capital.
Well, say make it around about Tamworth.
Well, definitely Armidale. I think it should be somewhere situated possibly further up the coast. At a good port, possibly Iluka or somewhere like that.
Well, somewhere on the coast.
Newcastle.
Moree.
Why?
Maybe Newcastle.
I think that decision should be left to the executive of the new state if and when it comes to fruition.
If Newcastle is to become a part of the new state, there's no question in my mind that it should be the capital. To start with, the people are here, the great proportion of the people of this new state would live in this area, and we already have well-established government offices for all departments here in Newcastle that naturally would go over to the new state, and it would be the obvious place for the capital, I would say, for at least 10 years until the matter is straightened out by the new state parliament.
It's the duty of all people to vote in the new state referendum, as voting is compulsory. Whether you vote yes or no is purely a matter for yourself. The main thing is that the election, the referendum is like any other election. The usual polling place will be open and it is your duty to vote. The referendum will be conducted under the Electoral and Electorals Act, as is any other election, and it is your duty to vote and to decide this issue.
The emergence of environmental pollution as one of the world's major problems has disclosed to the public generally a situation which has been known to scientists for a long time. It has been more than suspected by many other people, however. Those living and working in heavy industrial areas have learned by experience about air pollution. Now, the seas and the rivers are being polluted at a rapidly growing rate. The land itself is being corrupted, and now we have the added problem of noise pollution. All major cities are suffering from the growing pollution caused by motor vehicles and from the toxic gases emitted by industrial plants. It is clear that the whole problem now demands action on a worldwide scale. In Newcastle, New South Wales, very definite views on pollution are held by the director of the Hunter Valley Research Foundation, Professor C.C.
Problems of the quality of the environment are not just problems of today, although we tend to think of this sometimes. The real problem is one of acceleration. The sorts of things that we see about us now in the way of air pollution, water pollution, land pollution are in fact getting worse much more rapidly than they have in the past, and this really is what we have to look at, how to control this speed and how to measure the interaction of the various parts, which maybe are accelerating at different rates anyway. Maybe we don't have the same sort of problem coming up in the same way as in the past. The growth of population throughout the world, I think, is the basic cause of our present troubles in association with this acceleration. We have far more people today on the Earth than we had a few years ago, and in 30 years' time we will have doubled the Earth's population. Now this means that questions of clean air for breathing, let alone anything else, will be very real problems. Now added to this, the people of the world are becoming urbanised. At the beginning of this century, about 70% of the people in most countries would have lived in the country. They would have been rural dwellers. It's estimated by the World Health Organization that very shortly only 18 or 20% of people will be in fact rural dwellers, particularly in the advanced industrial economies. And the result is that we have tremendous urbanisation. We have people pushing together in larger and larger agglomerations of cities and towns. Now, there a lot of problems arise. Firstly, there's the problem of the clean air in and over all the city. There's the problem in the streets. There's the problem of providing open spaces where people can actually walk and breathe the air. There's the question of waste disposal, because we live in a waste-making society. And all the uproars about garbage and similar things are not just crassness by industrial groups or by aldermen who can't get on with their employees. They are in fact symptomatic of this colossal problem of the rising amount of garbage, waste and rubbish that's infecting our life. Now, added to this, we have a rising standard of living, so that people are becoming more mobile, they're becoming better off, they're demanding more leisure. The automobile, I suppose, stands as the great symbol in Australia and in other industrial countries of this development. And the automobile in itself is, of course, a major maker of waste and a major polluter, as I'll mention in a moment or two. Traditionally, the air and the sea have been the great disposal areas, the waste disposal areas of the Earth. And ever since there's been large industrial development, we've been pouring rubbish into the sea and into the air. And there's been no particular complaint about this, although corruption of beaches or fallout over cities such as Manchester in England or Newcastle in Australia have been long-standing areas for complaint of these things. But now we're starting to see that with the speed up in this whole cyclical process, we're in danger of corrupting the sea and of corrupting the air and of corrupting land and indeed affecting agriculture, our food and our crops, the produce of the sea and the coastal environments themselves. So that we have to look much more closely at the traditional places where we used to throw rubbish. I said the role of the automobile was crucial in this, and of course it is. A great deal of research is going on now to try to make the automobile engine burn more efficiently. And because automobiles idle more and more in congested streets, then they create more and more corrupting gases. Also, we're controlling the fallout from chimneys of factories. The BHP in Newcastle, for example, the oldest steel plant in Australia, is spending $12 million at the present time to control fallout, and so is the Electricity Commission at its great plants and in other places. On the east coast of Australia, where most of our industry is, we're fortunate in having westerly winds for a major part of the year. These carry a lot of this atmospheric corruption out over the ocean where it's dispersed in the wastes of the Pacific. But the nor'easter is a problem wind for us because it comes down the coastal areas for many months and in fact will infect the local environment. There's one other point I think to be made about pollution, and that is that it has been discovered by physical and engineering scientists as an area of social responsibility in which they feel they ought to make comment, in which they ought to be active. As an economist and a social scientist, I'm pleased about this. We've long had to bear the brunt of criticising society and of trying to set society right about certain things. But there is a caution also to be extended here. Physical and engineering scientists are not nearly as practised in talking about the problems of society, and they can be carried away by the discovery that if they say something, it has a great social impact. So there is always to be taken into account that slight discounting factor of being aware of the fact that we do have great problems, but don't let's panic. They can be brought under control by the same sorts of thinking and action that in fact created them.
Well, now, just breaking in there, local government has facilities for measuring fallout and for some noxious gases.
Wait a minute, Will. Can you remember that question?
In recent comments on greater control of environmental pollution in New South Wales, you mentioned a tightening up on the control of air pollution. Now, just what did you have in mind for this?
Well, this is a general review of the stage that we've reached in the improvement of air quality. The Clean Air Act was passed in 1961. The regulations came into effect in 1965, and so there's been 5 years to gain experience and see what is happening, and it's an appropriate time to tighten up and review penalties and review all aspects because of the increasing awareness in the community of need for action.
Well, now, in recent months, your system in Britain, although it has a lot of shortcomings, seems to be a good one. Do you think that the control provisions in New South Wales are strong enough and tough enough to bring about a major elimination of air pollution, say, from industry, first of all?
Yes, the general principles of the legislation, I'm sure, are all right. I worked in London in 1952 during the time when it was thought that some 4,000 people died from chest conditions. Recently I was amazed to see that the buses no longer spout black fumes, the tremendous improvement in air quality in London and other parts, I think the smokeless area was first established in Manchester in my day in the UK. We had discussions with Professor Lawther at Bart's Hospital, who's done a great deal in this field. I'm sure our law is adequate. We're somewhat handicapped in applying to private industry strict sanctions in this field when there are many governmental enterprises causing problems which will require tens of millions of dollars to remove.
Well, there's one point that strikes me. From my memory, under the New South Wales provisions, according to certain industries or certain categories of industries, we have maximum permitted emissions. Now, wouldn't it be better to aim at sort of virtual total elimination rather than say you are permitted to make so much pollution?
Well, there's a very important element in this. Certainly, if we were starting over and we didn't have existing industries which are long established, I can speak of a few in Newcastle and Wollongong as well as the metropolitan area of Sydney, and they are important economic units. It's necessary for them to continue to support the state's economy, provide employment, things of this kind, so there's a balance. Certainly we are following a policy that anything that's being built now has the strictest requirements imposed on it, and the emission limits under the regulations are being applied. Some exemptions have been granted, but even the exemptions are running off, and we're making it apparent that they will.
Weaknesses that we noticed in the British system was a lot of the control power. While this is an act of national application, a lot of the control power is left in the hands of local government, and this sort of indicate that there should be a central control authority rather than leaving a lot in the hands of local government.
Well, I think in all fields there is a very valuable partnership with local government. The whole of our health services are based on an active participation by local government. The type of local government of which you speak in the United Kingdom is almost tantamount to our state governments in New South Wales, in that they have substantial revenues on their own account. They control education, health, a variety of other activities, and so I don't think it can be compared, although the principle that you mentioned of the need for local government bodies to cooperate. The City Corporation of Newcastle on Tyne, for instance, in northern England, obviously it is essential for other adjoining areas to cooperate, just the same as I'm sure it is here in the field of garbage disposal, or even in the treatment of sewage, of raw sewage and its proper treatment. You can see examples in Denmark and elsewhere of where 4 or 5 local government bodies have come together to deal with garbage, to deal with sewage, and of course this makes a much better establishment and the result much more effective. I'm sure that the local government approach in the United Kingdom is an extremely good one, despite those deficiencies of which you mention. We have the 3 tiers of government here. I'm sure that local government is now taking a far greater interest in this overall question of the environment. I'm grateful for this because of the awareness that it's making, but we would continue to look to local government in their approvals of applications for industries which will participate in this field. We will continue to look to them to exercise a great deal of responsibility before granting approval.
Yes, well, this means that you're leaving administration on the local level to local government, but you're still going to have the ultimate say on what happens.
Well, yes, and this, I'm sure that this is so. The local government in this country has only the powers conferred by the 1919 Act, and but in a wide variety of fields. See, people say we're not doing anything about water pollution or pollution of waters at the moment, but in fact, this department follows up through local government agencies many complaints in this field.
Well, now, there has been mention of a maximum penalty of $10,000 for water pollution in the future. Is there any thought to increasing the penalties as far as air pollution is concerned?
The penalties provided under the Clean Air Act are under review at the moment. Will be adequate, I'm sure, and I don't think penalties are the sole resource available to us. The better thing is a sense of responsibility in our community, because if every person doesn't wake up, we are going to smother ourselves in our own filth of a variety of kinds, just as we can see classic examples in America and elsewhere.
Well, this brings me to a question, of course, which I was going to ask you a little bit later, but actually pollution starts, if you divorce industry and such producers of pollution from it, actually pollution starts, I would think, with the individual, as you just say.
Starts from
how about
human
an
beings.
education program, a really solid education program to show them what they're doing to themselves?
This is right. Well, there's a great deal of development in the field of health education. New South Wales is the only state with a division of health education, working in conjunction with school teachers and the education department, a variety of voluntary agencies, not only in the field of drug abuse, but in this other field of protection of the environment. And I've just been coming into town now, and I saw people throwing paper around in the street, things of this kind. Certainly education is one aspect that's of tremendous importance. The media, such as yours, very influential, reaching into everybody's homes to awaken people that it's not funny to run some foul liquid into somebody else's vicinity or to poison their air. And of course local government's filled with beautiful examples of feuds between neighbours over incinerators, yes, and the disposal of garbage and things of this, yes, kind.
Well, so far we've sort of referred mainly to industry. On this?
Well, we saw a very good example recently during the petrol strike. If the petrol strike didn't do anything else, it certainly showed what the disappearance of motor vehicles from our streets meant in terms of air quality. And information and facilities of every kind, and in addition, of course, we have a first-class government analyst laboratory at Lidcombe where a great deal of assistance is provided.
Well, your mention of the Minister for Transport raises another question, of course, because it's an accepted fact that vehicles which are idling or running at slow speeds emit a lot of noxious fumes, while those running at 40 miles an hour or more burn just about all their fuel. Now you've got this problem of peak hour congestion where vehicles are standing for 10, 20 minutes at a time idling with their engines and consequently emitting a lot of fumes. How does it strike you, the thought that maybe parking areas outside the city with feeder bus services in would keep a lot of this traffic out of the canyons in the city? Now, I mention this because, you know, this is a deadly problem and it needs drastic action to fix it.
This is right. Well, look, there's really two aspects to that. One, a transport problem of the movement in cities, which is rapidly becoming almost impossible. And there are cities which have declared non-traffic areas. In Stockholm I saw one recently where there was only permission for people to walk, not for motor vehicles to enter at all. As far as this other clean air side of motor vehicle emissions, I have no doubt that steps being taken in other countries can be followed here, and that is that virtually reduces the discharge to a minimum, and there are devices which will enable this to be attained, provided they are insisted on being incorporated in the design of the vehicle.
Well, the whole question of atmospheric pollution, of course, I think is highlighted by Pittsburgh, which spent $450 million on its program. It was probably one of the filthiest industrial cities in the world, and now it boasts of being one of the cleanest. But it cost $450 million to do it. Now, at the recent Eastbourne conference in England on air pollution, it was quoted that the removal of pollution was not the real problem, but how much money people were prepared to spend to remove it. Now, what chance do you think government has of convincing private industry, other government departments and the individual to spend enough money to do it properly?
Every chance, I'm sure. We've received a great deal of cooperation in the clean air field from old established industries who have spent substantial sums of capital money in Sydney, Newcastle and Wollongong particularly, and are continuing to do so. Because it is only by the evidence that this is being done that we're granting them exemptions from emission limits on a temporary basis, on a regular review basis. I'm sure there are many people in our community who superficially think that this can be achieved, an improvement can be achieved by waving a wand. It can't. It's a combination of factors of personal knowledge, personal responsibility, cooperation, expenditure of funds, and every now and again a good kick in the backside where the cooperation is not being evident. But a lot of money will be required. It can be spread on a per capita basis, I'm sure, and first-class results can be achieved as long as we work towards this goal to which the government is working of a principal supervisory agency in the State Pollution Control Authority. Then all the various agencies which are in existence or being brought into existence in the field of air and water and litter and disposal of garbage and problems of noise and things of this kind. I'm sure eventually we will have a specialist unit which will be devoted to all aspects. And so the present responsibilities of local government, present responsibilities of health, present responsibilities of Minister of Transport, and all sorts of other things that will emerge as we continue to develop problems for ourselves, as we crowd together like ants in an extreme urban society, which is very bad. I'm sure that we will ultimately see a specialist unit which will be charged with the protection of the environment so that we may continue to live in decency and with a reasonable chance for those that come after us to enjoy decent standards, and not the conditions that we are creating at the moment and leaving for those that come after us. The government
Look, there's money. The down-to-earth Northern English coined the phrase to describe their own conditions. But now it has international application. As national wealth grows, so does the output of waste products. As more countries change from agricultural to industrial ways of life, the problem of pollution must become aggravated. The effects of the accumulation of pollutants in the upper atmosphere now threatens to bring about changes in the Earth's climate. Man has set himself on the road to extinction. Here in Australia, we're only a short way along the road. We still have a choice: to go on our own careless way and let things take their course, or to begin to take definite and positive action to solve the atmospheric pollution problem. The solemn warning comes in the words of Newcastle upon Tyne's Chief Public Health Officer. Uncontrolled and unrestricted industrial development without any thought of social amenities and social circumstances. I do hope that this is one of the situations where Australia won't reproduce and repeat our stupid mistakes.